Hello there. In a previous video, we talked about custom logic-based routing with the Ciw Python package, where we could subclass from a node routing object, or class, I should say, and override the next node method. But sometimes there is rerouting, like when a customer's service has been interrupted, that node shoots off that customer to go to some other node. And there's a different method that we can implement when we subclass to capture that behavior. So this will be probably a pretty short video, but let's just define such an example. So let's import Ciw, and we'll define a class that is going to be whatever you want to call it. Hopefully something a little bit more creative than custom rerouting, but we're just going to follow the documentation here. So node routing. And we could, in the same method, probably should implement this next node method, and that takes in self, and it will also consider the individual that we want to consider routing. And here, just for the sake of simplicity, let's say that they leave the system entirely, so nodes -1 is the exit node of the system. Now let's get to rerouting, where what happens if a customer's service has been interrupted so they didn't complete service? In other words, this is for when service is completed, but we might want to define something for when it's interrupted. So that is the next node. And you can see there's also one for jockeying, but we'll leave that for another time for rerouting. And here, because of autocomplete, it did something I actually don't want. That's pretty funny and great at the same time. Anyway, I just want to say, well, let's go return self.simulation, and we'll go, in this case, maybe nodes 2. It always returns the second node. So these return, just for clarity of the types here, an instance of Ciw.node. And that's about all you have to do to define rerouting behavior. So this, of course, can get more complicated, where you might have, if some condition is met, then do that. Otherwise, return some other node according to whatever logic you like. Anyway, you can make this as complicated or as simple as you need it to be for your problem. Also remember that because classes are classes, you could also define, something that's more stateful, where this routing functionality has a kind of memory to it of, I don't know, probably would want to put this in dunder init, because it'd probably be an instance thing, not a class level thing, I would say. Where for whatever reason, you got stuff, self.stuff equals stuff. And then, you might say something like self.stuff is equal to update stuff called on self.stuff. And that starts to get you into having, a kind of state to the routing system itself, to this routing node. Anyway, and as you probably remember from the create network function, that you pass this into a network router, and that network router object gets passed into the create network function. We've seen that before. So just a thing to note, that I'll just read from the documentation here, that rerouting customers ignores queuing capacities. So what that means is if I'm at node 1 and my service is interrupted and I end up going to node 2, that's still allowed and will still happen, even if, according to the capacity of node 2, that node 2 is full. So this is a thing that will temporarily override what the actual capacity is. So do be careful about that. If you need a kind of workaround, remember that you can often model extrinsic states of a customer by another node. And so you might actually say that the rerouting, if I'm really supposed to actually end up in node 2 when I'm kicked out of node 1, that I might create a node 3, which routes to node 2, but through a normal routing mechanism. And so you can use that extra extrinsic state to get to node and if you don't want that overriding behavior of saying, well, you got to wait. Maybe you're even blocked until node 2 has enough capacity. So that's just an important little footnote about the behavior. It can override queuing capacities. Hopefully that's useful. Hopefully the whole idea of rerouting, if you need it, now has become available to you when you are making simulations with the Ciw Python package. And with that, I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.